I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Imogen Poots, who stars in Outer Range as the mysterious Autumn. Um, Everybody watching this, there are going to be spoilers about Outer Range. If you haven't seen the season, go away, watch it, come back. We'll just put that out there. Now, Imogen, there's so much to unpack with this show. The visual language I thought was breathtaking. The story blew my mind. So before we go any further, what did you most love about being a part of this show and bringing this character to life?
Well, I think there's something really magic that happens when you think you're embarking on a risk because it's so unknown. And I thought it was ambitious, the fusing of like Western genre with, people say sci-fi, but with sort of just the idea of the unknown and something like that happening on the land. And it just threw up so many cool possibilities, and it was very unique, felt like something I hadn't come across before and hadn't done yet. I felt like I really wanted to be in a Western. I've always really wanted to. And learning about like the team, that they'd assembled, like the cast, and then people behind the camera. Like I'd been a really big fan of Drew Daniels, the cinematographer, and all that. So it was just like, what a dream.
Yeah, and then you got the role, and that's so exciting. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
I just was thinking, she comes across as a free thinker, a traveler, and she seems pretty harmless, but there's this fascinating and unsettling like curiosity and agenda even in her eyes that I found really hard to pin down at first. And I was just so drawn to the way you were portraying her. And so then I was thinking, what did you make of her when you started to develop how you were going to portray her? Because obviously she goes through quite some changes over the season.
Yeah, and quite kind of extreme changes. Because obviously at the beginning you only get a few scripts and that's what you work off. But even with a character like this, there's a lot of mystery around her past. So you want to make sure you're not just playing an enigma or like a, figurehead for some form of speech. But they gave me an idea, Brian and Zev, who are our showrunners, as to kind of what would happen and the arc of the show. And so you try and sort of plant certain things along the way. But really with a character like this, it's just each scene is almost its own world. You just have to be really present with your other actor and sort of what she's trying to find out in that particular moment in time. Like her curiosity is just like rapacious. It's so intense.
Yeah, I know that rapacious curiosity. I haven't quite seen anything like that in a while. What are the tricks that you're doing as a performer, actor, trying to like imbue something in this character? Is it just in your facial expressions? Is it your voice? Like what was your strategy in trying to make sure that you could get into this mindset that is very unusual and different?
I think there was something like borderline. What's the best way to describe it? I think because she's sort of this master manipulator,
Yeah.
it's like leaning into like her femininity or leaning into the sexuality, or maybe even the sense that with certain characters, it obviously changes like either side of the dial, but there's a sort of intensity to her that felt animalistic. And yeah, it was sort of just, I remember vividly with each scene partner sort of really leaning into what sort of obsession feels like. And perhaps that's quite flattering, to some men. So she could sort of get out of them what she needed to and sort of be a puppeteer. But that was something I kind of held inside sometimes. And she was so kind of out of her depth at a certain point that you've got to kind of roll with that.
Yeah, see, that all came across because like you could have played her in a very different way and it would have been very black and white, and she would have been kind of just super manipulative and even just a villain. But no, that's not how it came across at all. She was very nuanced, and I almost kind of was rooting for her in some way, and then of course things go a little pear-shaped at the end. I find that really interesting. Like I guess you do as well, right? You're playing someone that's really different and interesting and nuanced, and you can just kind of play with that, and that's fun.
Yeah, and it's sort of unplanned and it's scary because you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know what you're going to get back from, the person you're sharing the scene with. And there's something, people kept saying unhinged and using words like that, but it feels just sort of, she's very, very present, despite the fact it's all kind of wrapped up in the future and the past, ironically.
Yeah.
But yeah, avoiding the kind of pitfalls of those stereotypical wanderers, traversing the land, and like itinerants who sort of have all this hot air. I wanted her to have more more groundedness than that. But it's difficult because obviously someone's hero is another person's villain, so there you go.
That's right. I'm so glad you said that because I was like, am I wrong? Because I've seen a lot of articles that you've done where people have called it unhinged or whatever, and that's fine. But I don't know, I didn't really get that. I thought she was actually very much in control. She's been through time. She knows stuff. Like, of course, she's going to be a little bit,
Yeah.
and I got that from you. I thought it was great.
I know. It's funny how, especially when the show came out, the expectations you see that people put on a certain type of character, they're like, well, she's got to be the femme fatale, or she's got to be the mesmerizing blonde, and it's fun subverting those, but it's interesting that such a tired, expectation that people foresee with certain characters.
Yeah, it's kind of boring actually. So I'm glad that that's not the direction that the show went. Let's talk about the big reveal because I kind of felt slightly dumb that I didn't see it coming at all.
My friends were shocked, and then some people were like, "Oh, I kind of figured it out because of olives."
Yeah, because then afterwards you're like, of course, look at the casting. Like, yes, this makes so much sense, but I didn't see it coming.
Oh, great.
That's good though. That's Brian. Congratulations for writing that. So okay, there's a sense that she and Royal are connected though, obviously. Before that even happens, we ultimately learn she's Royal's granddaughter from the future. So firstly, what did you think of that narrative thread and the big reveal? I mean, you're playing it.
Yeah. So Brian and Zev told me that they revealed the twist, like just a few days before we started filming. And it was just a really fucked up everything I kind of planned already, because it was like recalibrating and thinking about it all differently. Because that meant like Tom was my dad, and then sort of Josh is my like grandfather. It was sort of strange, but I didn't want that to get in the way of the truthful moments between the characters. And I think you want to make sure you're not like playing the twist, but still kind of maintaining some form of a wink with the audience, perhaps. I don't know. That's probably came when I watched it back myself. But it's jarring to have something that heavy sort of placed upon you as if you could somehow fail, with something like the twist, which is, it's abstract. It's outside of the kind of realm of performance, I suppose.
That's a good point. Do you think it would have, in retrospect, would it have been better for you not to have known and have found out about it at the last second?
Yeah, it's fun thinking about that because, she is trying to piece it together, right? So
yeah.
There's a world in which I think that could have been cool. I don't know how they would have kept that secret because after a few weekends, we were all hanging out the whole time and drinking lots of tequila, and I think it would have slipped out,
Yeah, that sounds like fun. Yeah, I've heard about the cast bonding sessions out in where were you, like in New Mexico or somewhere like that?
Mexico and Santa Fe. So it was just like,
oh gosh,
dreamy.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
amazing.
Great.
So that begs the question though, just from your perspective, what do you think explains the animus probably between her and Royal? Because it really comes to a head, they're shooting at each other. Well, yeah, she is his granddaughter. So what do you think?
Well, it begs the question, what kind of happened before it just shows that sort of is blood enough, the power and the control that she desires. Some things, I think that's why there's kind of more to tell potentially with the story, sort of what has enraged her and what sort of the kernel that's kind of set off this person's behavior, and yeah, what does she really want? So it's all of those. I guess the big question for me with the show was always about sort of probing the idea of like ownership, especially when it comes to America. And there's nothing more infuriating than watching two people fight over something that isn't even theirs to begin with. So there's something going on with that too. There's some sort of right that she has to that land, which is just incredibly naive, apart from anything else.
Yeah, I really love that the most, because I'm like, who do you both think you are? Fighting over this void that is obviously so larger than life and existential and otherworldly. But I enjoy that. It's actually a really, really good kind of exploration on the human condition, that we do plant our flag into things and we take ownership of them and we'll kill over it. And that's what the show does. It talks about these really large issues that, I thought was really interesting. So I was also thinking, this is a completely separate topic. The scenes between you and Noah Reid are amazing. I still can't work out what his character Billy was doing, and the singing was so amazing. He's got the most beautiful voice.
I know, because he's released albums as well. Noah's got like a full-on. He's got like full-on albums. Yeah. He said he was like moonlighting as a singer. No, he's not. He's got serious.
He's got serious cred. So I'm still working out their connection, but they really obviously do connect. So this is more about you and Noah, not necessarily the characters, because I just think that's a little inexplicable for me. We could be here all day. What did you most value about working with? I'm sure you've been asked about Josh Brolin, and he's larger than life, but Noah's a different kettle of fish. What did you most value about working with him?
Oh, well, we first met on the plane, actually, when we were flying into Albuquerque, because I think we both had changed. He was coming from Toronto and I was coming from London, so we met on the like little plane and the connecting flight. And it was just really interesting that he was the first person I met, and you don't ever lose that. The next day at the table read, that's like the one person and then I think we were the two people who weren't American, which we would always forget about, but then kind of remember occasionally, like just by being like pathologically polite, and everyone else was just cool. But I love Noah. We became really good friends, and we laughed so much, and that's so valuable, because this was like 7 months shoot, and we knew where we had to get to together, and that he would sort of become her disciple in some ways, and what that meant. But I think the chemistry, or whatever you want to call it, just the fact that hanging out with that person was so much fun, in the sense of like being a kid, like being a 13-year-old with like your best friend. It was that kind of sibling-esque fun. And I think that must have, done something when we had to do kiss scenes with KY jelly pouring out your mouth and all sorts of things. It was just a picnic.
Oh, that sounds delightful. There's just some really, really compelling energy between the two of you when you're on screen. So that explains it, actually, because I know what you mean. You kind of bond with that first person, and then it becomes something a little bit different and special.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. There's another thing occurred to me, and I've asked this to people behind the camera and of the people, the cast as well. So the show really rewards viewers that are patient and that are paying attention. There's a lot of answers that still haven't been, a lot of questions that have been left unanswered. And if there's another season, that'd be amazing. If not, then we're kind of stuck with what we've seen, and we have to kind of piece it together ourselves. So I just wonder, as production shifts and narratives shift and things are changing, and you're doing table reads and you're trying to work out what's going on, what was the sense on set about, what are we doing? What is this about? Was there a lot of questions, or was everyone very clear on the direction that the show was going?
Because my main scene partners would have been Josh, and then at the latter end of the show, Noah. I think by the time it got to stuff with Noah and I, there was almost just egging each other on type of attitude, and we sort of knew that those characters had the benefit and the permission to occupy a very surreal space. But with Josh and I think we started with a lot of scenes together at the beginning of the shoot, and I think we did have questions, mainly to do with how to straddle the tone with the story, you know, because you don't want to end up sort of like the twist playing the tone. And like that was very much sort of growing pains, like, is it natural here, is it, you know, but in terms of the actual absurdity of the whole thing, I get the impression that the people who ended up being cast or hired sort of never questioned that. There was never any, you know, seeking out of something linear, or there was just we've made a pact to sort of be a part of this most peculiar beast.
Yeah, it sure as hell was, with the actual beasts that kept
Yeah.
popping up on the horizon, thinking, what is happening? Obviously, a lot of that is answered at the end.
Yeah.
God, I just thinking back to when I watched this, I felt really satisfied by the whole season. I don't know, I couldn't wait every night to sit on the couch and put the fire on and just immerse myself in this world. I just wonder if you felt the same way, like when you did. I don't know if you watched the whole thing, but there's something very ethereal. It almost felt like I was watching an indie art piece, very beautiful to immerse yourself in. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, I felt the same way. I felt that on set, because I felt like even the setups that were occurring, and Drew and Adam's setups, and then Jay, who was DOP when Amy shot her episodes, there were just sort of unusual choices being made and risks taken, and that's pretty cool, especially when there's a studio kind of potentially breathing down your neck or whatever, just to have that freedom. But perhaps the studio facilitated that. I don't know. It did feel that way. And then watching it back, because of course I'd missed out on all the rodeo stuff and the powwow, that scene with Tamara, and so seeing that stuff on screen was so cool. And I felt, you know, you kind of like, oh gosh, I'm in the show too. Like, that was a great feeling. Sometimes you can watch something and just be like, you know, this is a piece of shit, and then to be in something that you can defend and you love talking about and people that you love, that's a pretty, yeah, I don't know if that's that common.
Yeah, I actually don't think it is. And this is what I hear all the time from people that I'm interviewing, that, like, you know, they really relish those opportunities to do some really interesting stuff that audiences are really responding to. And that brings me to this question, the final question, about before I ask you something else, and that is, you know, Autumn is very controlled, and, you know, there's a lot going on behind her eyes. And then, of course, things get really big later on, especially when she's left for dead. You know, she's chucked off a car, and then she becomes kind of slightly cult-ish. And it's a simple question: do you relish those opportunities because you're having to be so controlled, to then finally just go really big and just kind of let it out? What's that? Is that cathartic?
Yeah, it really is. And sometimes you need someone to give you a bit of a push off the edge. And Larry Trilling, who was our director for the last 2 episodes, was really supportive and encouraging. He was like, he spoke about like metaphysical, you know, use that term a lot, which again was something that you just carry with you. But I think you need someone sometimes who says, like, you have to go there, you know, and I really respond to that. It just makes it a really safe place to embarrass yourself or go too far or whatever. And certainly after Constraint, I felt at the beginning of the show, you know, there's something, for lack of a better word, just like blonde about the character. There's just quite a like, there's just like hair and a lot of wide eyes. So it was cool to I was very excited to shake that off. And I wonder if it's the same as sort of, you know, overthinking can just, like with writing, if you're overthinking it, it's like what just comes out might be really valuable. You know, you can't control all of it.
That is so true. Always, it's always better to just stream of consciousness, and then you can chisel back if you need to. Final question. Because I really can't help myself, Imogen, I have to ask you this, because The Father was like my favorite film in 2020. 2020 was a difficult year for everybody.
Yeah.
And I saw that film so many times. When I first saw it, I had no idea what was going on. I had to watch it again to figure it out. But it just occurred to me that the acting in that was incredible. Sir Anthony Hopkins won the Oscar. Olivia Colman is a legend. So you're on set with these two powerhouses. What's the highlight? Like, what do you most value about that experience?
Well, yeah, that was a pretty cool place to be, making that film with Florian, the filmmaker, and that cast. It's funny, I immediately, like, if I'm just like free associating, I just remember giggling so much with Olivia Colman between the takes. She's just the warmest, most generous person. And the same with Anthony Hopkins. He's just you can tell he still loves what he does and he wants to share that. And he was so cool with me. There were moments, you know, at times it was like a tricky place to sort of figure out how to fill with that character. And he was just really, really present and kind and funny and loose and just willing to clown around. But yeah, I'm blown away by those people. That cast was pretty phenomenal. But getting that like front seat to watch those performers go at it was just like, wow, really cool.
Yeah, and by the way, you were no slouch in that either, but we're just putting that out. Imogen, thanks so much for your time today. I had a ball with Out of Range. I really hope they bring you back. If they don't, we'll just watch it again. But thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.